So, good evening everyone. Welcome to Bajirao IAS Academy. UPSC Mains 2024 question paper analysis. So, you all knew that in previous lecture we have discussed the case studies and the framework, the structuring of the case studies. And in this session we have some more case studies to discuss which were asked in 2024 mains question paper. So by this discussion you will get to know how to address these case studies, because remember, as I've already told you, that this year case studies, the nature of case studies are very lengthy, they are very exhaustive, and the demand of the questions which followed these case studies also need a comprehensive and a very detailed answers. So therefore, if you write this answer in a case study in a perfect manner, there is a high probability that you would get more than 60% of the marks in case studies, and that will also help you score a very good marks in this paper. So as I have already stressed on the role that the ethics paper usually plays in getting you a good rank or getting you a very good marks overall in the mains paper, right? So the first case study with which we are starting this discussion is with a multi-pronged strategy of the central and state governments, especially in the last few years, the Naxalite problem has been resolved to a large extent in the affected states of the country. Right, so I'll try to explain you what is this Naxalite problem. So this is also known as left-wing extremism. I hope you may have heard about this problem of left-wing extremism in different states. For example, Chhattisgarh, Odisha, Jharkhand, parts of Maharashtra, Madhya Pradesh, Telangana, Andhra Pradesh. So these states have been still suffering with the problem or with the menace of left-wing extremism. Remember that our former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh rightly held that left-wing extremism is a most serious internal security problem or challenge that India has been facing. Right? So in fact, both center and state governments over the years have adopted a multi-pronged strategy, particularly to deal with the problem of Naxalism or left-wing extremism. So we could say that those measures followed by the center and state governments have yielded good results in terms of eliminating left-wing extremism, but one thing is that we have not completely eliminated left-wing extremism. Still there are a lot of pockets of left-wing extremism across different states in our country, and they still continues to pose serious internal security challenges. However, there are few pockets in certain states where a Naxalite problem is still persists. Now when I say a few states, a few pockets in certain states, for example, Odisha, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, northern part of Andhra Pradesh, Telangana, parts of Maharashtra. So in these areas, a problem of Naxalism or left-wing extremism still prevalent. So Rohit is posted as a superintendent of police for the last 1 year, and in one of the districts which is still affected by the left-wing extremism or Naxalite problem. So Rohit is an IPS officer, but he still where he was posted as SP Special Operations, still there is a problem of Naxalism or left-wing extremism. The district administration has taken a lot of developmental works in the recent past in the Naxalite affected areas to win hearts and minds of the people. Now, when we talk about a multi-pronged strategy to deal with the problem of left-wing extremism, so it is very important to win the support of the local people, because very often the local people are the supporters of Naxalite movement or left-wing extremism. There are a lot of sympathizers among those local people who provide men and materialistic support to these cadres of left-wing extremism. So therefore, it is very important for the government to win the hearts and minds of those local people, to win over the problem of left-wing extremism. Now, in fact, over a period of time, Rohit established an excellent intelligence network. So it is also very important that there is a strong and robust intelligence network, and that has to be established, because as an SP special operations, you need to regularly collect information, you need to gather intelligence about the activities, the movements and operations of these Naxalite cadres. So day-to-day surveillance monitoring is very important, right? So Rohit established an excellent intelligence network to get the real-time information regarding the movement of Naxalite cadre. So to instill the confidence in the public and have a more ascendancy over the Naxalites, a number of cordons search operations are being conducted by police, right? So in every village where there is a huge Naxalite problem or left-wing extremist problem, it is very important that the police forces regularly conduct a cordons and search operations. Rohit, who himself leading one of those contingents, got a message through his intelligence source that about 10 hardcore Naxalites were hiding in a particular village with a sophisticated weapons with them. And without wasting any time, Rohit reached the target village with his team and laid out a foolproof cordon and started carrying out a systematic search. So we have understood that Rohit, SP of a district which is still affected by the left-wing extremism, has got information that 10 hardcore Naxalites were hiding in a particular village with a sophisticated weapons. So when Rohit got this information, so he immediately reached the village where Naxalites were hiding, and he along with his team started cordon the entire village, right? A foolproof cordon, and even started carrying out a systematic search to nab those 10 hardcore Naxalites. So during this search led by Rohit, his team managed to overpower all 10 Naxalites along with their automatic weapons. However, meantime, more than 500 tribal women who are sympathetic towards these hardcore Naxalites surrounded the village, and they started marching towards the target house as well. So these women have been demanding the release of these Naxalites by the police. Otherwise, it would lead to any unintended situation. So they were shouting, and they were also demanding the release of insurgents, since they are their protectors and saviors. The situation on the ground was becoming very critical, as tribal women extremely agitated, and they are very aggressive. So they are very aggressive, they are very assertive, and they are moving towards the house where a police stationed these hardcore Naxalites. And in fact, Rohit also tried to contact his superior officers to get some input, to get some advice about how to deal with the situation. However, these efforts of Rohit failed to do so due to poor connectivity in that village. And now Rohit was in a great dilemma, since out of Naxalites apprehended, right, 2 were not only hardcore but top insurgents with prize money of and 10 lakh on their heads, but were also involved in recent ambush of security forces, right? So these 10 hardcore Naxalites were part of several operations, several attacks against the security forces, right? They previously led a lot of attacks, and in fact release of these 10 hardcore Naxalites would be a great blunder on the part of the police forces, particularly Rohit. Right, so because of that reason, now he's in a great dilemma. What should he do? So however, if he did not release these Naxalites, the situation get out of control, since the tribal women are aggressively charging towards them. Now in that case, to control the situation, Rohit might have resort to firing, which may lead to loss of valuable lives of civilians, and it would further complicate the existing situation. Right, so this is the entire case study. Now what should Rohit do in that particular situation? Because now he is in a dilemma whether he should release these Naxalites, because the women were aggressively charging towards them. Right, so if police don't release these Naxalites, it would lead to any unintended situation. Right, so in fact it could even lead to police opening fire against tribal women, and that would be one of a grave mistake on the part of these police forces. So what needs to be done? So that is why Rohit is in a great dilemma. So we have a set of 4 questions. We need to address all these 4 questions. The first question is, what are the options available with Rohit to cope up with the situation? So we need to evaluate the options that Rohit have in front of him. Right, and second question, what are the ethical dilemmas being faced by Rohit? Rohit has been facing a lot of ethical dilemmas, so you need to write about these ethical dilemmas at least briefly. And third, which of the options do you think would be more appropriate for the Rohit to adopt, and why those options are more appropriate? And fourth, in present situation, what are the extra precautionary measures to be taken by the police in dealing with women protesters? So remember that this is a very comprehensive and it needs a very comprehensive and a detailed answer. So when we say what are the options available in front of Rohit, for example, so Rohit should not release those 10 Naxalites. Even if women are aggressively charging towards them, Rohit should release those 10 Naxalites because women have been demanding. So a lathi charge, opening fire on women would lead to the violation of rights and criticism of the police, criticism against the police. Right, so you need to evaluate all the options which are available, and what are the ethical dilemmas being faced by Rohit. So internal security, right, so it is all about the internal security, and it is also about a violation of rights in case Rohit opens fire against these tribal women, and it is also about a protection of ensuring peace in that particular region. So there are a lot of ethical dilemmas that Rohit has been facing. So you need to evaluate all these ethical dilemmas. And firstly, what are the options available with the Rohit to cope up with the situation? So the first option in front of Rohit is release all the Naxalites, right? So releasing all the Naxalites would help in de-escalating the problem. That means the reason for women charging or women aggressively, assertively moving towards the police is because of the arrest of these 10 hardcore Naxalites, right? So release the Naxalites would lead to de-escalation of the situation immediately, but it compromises the value or the principle of justice, and it also compromises rule of law, and it also violates ethical principle of Kantian duty. So Kantian Immanuel Kant so emphasizes on means over ends, right? So it also amounts to violating Kantian duty, and apart from that, rule of law would be supreme. So people and law enforcement agencies administrators, civil servants, everyone must uphold rule of law. Right, so in this situation, if Rohit releases all these Naxalites, that would amounts to compromising rule of law, and it also amounts to compromising the principle of justice. So why it compromises the principle of justice? Because those 10 hardcore Naxalites were previously responsible for a lot of terrorists, a lot of attacks on the security forces. Right. So secondly, Rohit and other police should start negotiating with the woman. So this would be another option in front of women. Right. So Rohit could particularly demonstrate the values of empathy, patience, and non-violence. Right. So he can use the value of emotional intelligence by explaining women about the legal consequences if they stop the police while performing their duty. And also Rohit can urge a peaceful dispersion of the woman. Right. So all these values could help negotiate. However, there is a less likelihood that this Rohit may not have adequate time to negotiate with the woman, because women were aggressively moving towards the police. Right. So they are angry and very aggressive. And secondly, use non-lethal force. So Rohit can also use non-lethal force such as tear gas. So that could show a prudence on the part of Rohit. So not directly opening fire against the women who are charging against the police. Right. So non-lethal weapons such as tear gas, water cannons can be used, and respect for the human rights is also very important. Right. So human rights must be protected and respected. And Rohit should also balance utilitarianism by minimizing harm while maintaining the public order. Right. So maintaining public order, peace and stability is utmost priority for Rohit. At the same time, he should also limit harm caused by the police to these women, or minimizing the harm caused to women. And Rohit can also wait for the reinforcements. So until then, Rohit should compel, Rohit should convince, and Rohit can also use the existing force to stop women marching aggressively towards them. So waiting for the backup demonstrates temperance and also strategic thinking. So overall, ensuring due process is followed while preventing unnecessary escalation, even using use of non-lethal force. So these are some of the options which are available in front of Rohit. So however, if you come across more options, you can also write all those options in this part. However, make sure that you have 4 pages for this particular case study, and also make sure that you address all these questions comprehensively. Right. So it should not be like you have addressed one question in a very detailed manner and you have compromised content on other questions. So that creates a poor impression about your answer. So second question, so what are the ethical dilemmas that Rohit has been facing? There are set of ethical dilemmas that Rohit has been facing. So there is a dilemma between moral responsibility of Rohit versus professional obligations. Now what is the professional obligation of Rohit? So Rohit needs to perform his professional duties. So that is, he must arrest those 10 hardcore Naxalites. However, when it comes to the moral responsibility, it is also very important that Rohit should respect the rights of tribal women. Right. So Rohit should not use force or large scale violence against these tribal women, because that would further aggravate the problem. That would further increases the disaffection of these tribal people against police and also state. And Rohit should always respect or prioritize public safety. And there is also a dilemma, an ethical dilemma between justice and immediate peace. right? So upholding law by detaining insurgents or releasing them to avoid unrest. So if Rohit releases those insurgents, so that would result in immediate peace. However, so if Rohit still arrests them, those four Naxalites, so it would comply with the principles of justice. And short-term de-escalation versus long-term security implications. So these 10 Naxalites are hardcore Naxalites. So even if Rohit releases those 10 hardcore Naxalites, it would create a large-scale internal security problem. So in the long term, it would create an internal security challenge. So Rohit should keep in mind the long-term security. So however, if Rohit releases those Naxalites, it would lead to short-term de-escalation, and it is also very difficult to arrest those hardcore Naxalites because they would be extra cautious next time. And ethical dilemma between non-violence versus enforcement. Okay, so there is a dilemma for Rohit between adhering to the value of non-violence by not using force against women. At the same time, there is also a need for strict enforcement to prevent insurgents from escaping. So enforcement is very important because with enforcement, Rohit can ensure that these Naxalites could not escape. And apart from that, so since Rohit is in an ethical dilemma, or he is in a dilemma, what should he actually do? Whether he should release all these Naxalites, or he should arrest them, and he should also face the women who were violently and aggressively marching towards the police. So Rohit also tried to contact his superiors for an advice, but he was unable to reach his superiors because of poor connectivity existing in that village. So there was a lack of superior guidance and acting without immediate instructions for higher authorities. So this was also another major problem. Now, which of the options do you think would be more appropriate for the Rohit to adopt, and why? So following options Rohit can adopt, and you have to write those options, and you should also write why Rohit should adopt those options. Again, you need to discuss this in a very detailed manner, and that is very important. So firstly, call for backup and reinforcements. So it is very important that with the limited amount of police forces, Rohit cannot ensure that he could deal with the tribal woman, and he could also arrest all those 10 hardcore Naxalites with sophisticated weapon. So Rohit should immediately call for reinforcements, and he should call for a backup. So through this, law enforcement is reinforced without resorting to drastic measures such as opening fire, using large-scale force, or violence against tribal women, because that would be counterproductive, and that creates disaffection against the state, also the police force, and that would also be used or exploited by these left-wing extremist organizations to recruit more youth into the militant Naxalite movement. Secondly, use of non-lethal crowd control methods. So we have discussed what are these non-lethal crowd control methods. So using tear gas and using water cannons. So this ensures civilian safety where large-scale violence is not used, and it also prevents escalation of violence, and it also upholds principles of non-violence. So thirdly, allows the police to maintain control of the situation without compromising the public trust. So one thing that we need to remember here, so rule of law must be upheld. So principle of justice must be upheld. Now it is the responsibility of the police forces to uphold the principle of rule of law. So for this, to ensure rule of law is upheld. So police must ensure that they can use this non-lethal crowd control methods to control the crowd, and they can ensure the arrest of these 10 hardcore Naxalites using the community leaders. The police forces can compel and convince the people, particularly the tribal women. So however, it is a long term, right? So it takes time. And apart from that, initiate a dialogue with the tribal leaders. So it is also very important. Tribal leaders and community leaders, so they can play a very important role. So they can play a role as an intermediaries. So demonstrate empathy, demonstrate a compassion, and show emotional intelligence. So that would build trust, and it also results in peaceful resolution of issues. And ultimately, so in the fourth part of the question, so what you have to write, so the question is, in the present situation, what are the extra precautionary measures to be taken by the police in dealing with women protesters? So when it comes to dealing with women protesters, so what are the extra precautionary measures that they have to undertake? So that is very, very important. Now, when particularly dealing with the women protesters, so precautions, primarily, they should be barricades. So right, so barricading, and apart from that, a deployment of women police to control women protesters is also very, very important. So adequate, a deployment of women police forces, and using non-lethal crowd control methods. Non-lethal crowd control method, so is also very, very important. And engaging with the community leaders is also very important, particularly women leaders at the community level, to deal with this problem. And there is a need to show emotional intelligence, right? So emotional intelligence, and also empathy, emotional intelligence and empathy, so to deal with the women protesters, right? So all these things have to be done, and we need to be extra cautious, particularly with respect to protection of rights of women. Protection of rights of women, it is very important that we need to protect rights of women, and we should also ensure safety of women, rights of women, safety as well as security of women. And there is a need to refrain from using violence and force. So all these things have to be precautionary measures that have to be followed. So avoid use of force. So under no circumstances lethal force should be avoided, should not be used against women protesters. And so non-lethal crowd controlling methods can be used as a method of last resort. So when we talk about non-lethal crowd controlling methods, so for example, tear gassing, so use of tear gas, and water cannons can be used, water cannons, tear gas, so barricading, so all these things can be done. So engaging with female police officers is also very, very important, right? So these female police officers can interact with the protesters, because that may help in bringing the situation under control, and that could also avoid large scale escalation of the situation. And there is a need to maintain a clear communication to understand the grievances of women, and also creating a sense, building trust that those grievances of women can be addressed. So that is also very important to de-escalate the situation. So make an effort to communicate early with the woman, and also ensure that they understand that police are there for safety and not their enemies. So we have to make sure that women understood this fact, that women are police are for the safety of women and police are not the enemies of women. And it is also very important that the law enforcement agencies and the police forces needs to be more and more sensitized. They need to respect the cultural sensitivities of the people, so understand the cultural dynamics of women, particularly the tribal woman, and also avoid actions that could be perceived as disrespectful or oppressive. And this is how you can address this particular question. So when we talk about the conclusion, so what you have to write in the conclusion, as part of the conclusion. So since the problem has been revolving around the issue of left-wing extremism or about the Naxalite movement, so you need to write about the problem or eliminating left-wing extremism should be the focus area. So conclusion should be on eliminating left-wing extremism, and you can write examples like Operation Samadhan or Mission Samadhan or Operation Samadhan that the Union government has launched to address the problem of left-wing extremism and also ensuring peace and development of these remote rural areas or pockets of left-wing extremism. And in fact, you can also write about the aspirational districts program of Niti Aayog. So we all knew that these districts are backward districts, and these districts are also suffering with the problem of left-wing extremism. So therefore, Niti Aayog launched aspirational districts program to address the backwardness of these districts in left-wing extremist states. Right, so you can, this is how you can address this particular case study. So next case study, so it is about conflict of interest, favoritism, nepotism. So those are the values which actually revolve around this particular case study, upholding the professionalism, professional ethical values, integrity. So those are the values around which this case study revolves. So the case study is that Sneha is a senior manager working for a big reputed hospital chain in a mid-sized city. For example, we have a large metropolitan cities. In each state we have a large metropolitan city. For example, in West Bengal, Kolkata is a metropolitan city. Now, apart from Kolkata, there are several mid-sized cities as well. They are not metropolitan cities, but they are also not smaller cities. Right? So there are a lot of mid-sized cities, and Sneha is a senior manager working for a big reputed hospital chain in a mid-sized city. So she has been made in charge of new super specialty center, that the hospital building with state-of-the-art equipment and world-class medical facilities. Okay, now Sneha has been made in charge of a new super specialty center, that the hospital's building with a state-of-the-art equipment, and this super specialty center will have a state-of-the-art equipment as well as world-class medical facilities. And in fact, the building has been reconstructed, and Sneha is starting the process of procurement for various equipment and machines. So Sneha is in charge of this particular super specialty center. So Sneha has started reconstruction of this super specialty center. So therefore, she has started the process of procurement of various equipment and machines. And in fact, as the head of the committee responsible for the procurement, she has invited bids from all the interested reputed vendors dealing with the medical equipment. And in fact, she also noticed that her brother, who is well-known supplier in this domain, has also sent his expression of interest as part of the bids that Sneha has invited for the procurement. So since the hospital is privately owned, right, so this is not a public limited company, the hospital is a privately owned, it is not mandatory for her to select only the lower bidder, right? So there is no mandatory provision, and it is not obligatory on the part of Sneha to select only the lowest bidder. So she is aware that her brother's company has been facing some financial difficulties. So Sneha's brother involved in this business of supplying equipment to the hospitals, and Sneha has invited some bids from the suppliers of equipment to the hospitals. Now Sneha's brother is now in some financial difficulties, and a big supply order will help him recover. At the same time, allocating the contract to her brother might bring charges of favoritism against her, and it would also tarnish the image in the hospital. The hospital management trusts her fully and would support any decision of her, right? So in fact, it is a classic case of conflict of interest, right? So conflict of interest. So acting in such a manner which benefits your family members, your own relatives, your friends, right? So that leads to compromising the principle of merit, and also compromising the values of impartiality, non-biased attitude, right? So all these things would be compromised. So it would also results in submitting oneself to this issue of conflict of interest. So in this context, so there are certain questions that we need to address based on the above description. So first question, what should be Sneha's course of action? So you need to evaluate the appropriate course of action for Sneha. So whether Sneha should give this tender to her brother. So whether Sneha should not submit herself to the issue of conflict of interest. She should not show any favoritism, any nepotism. So she should give the tender, so which is much more efficient, where the bidder could provide a quality equipment at lower price, right? So you have to write all these options, and you need to evaluate all these options one by one. And secondly, how would she justify what she chooses to do, right? So for example, if Sneha chooses to give this order to her brother, so how would Sneha justifies giving order to her brother? So if Sneha gave order to another bidder, rejecting his brother's tender, so how Sneha could justify not giving order to her brother? So you need to write that in the second part of the question. And thirdly, in this case, how is medical ethics compromised with vested personal interest? So that has to be addressed in the third question, right? So how is medical ethics is compromised with vested personal interest? Because see, it is very important that this is a super specialty hospital center with a state of the art and sophisticated equipment. So equipment should have adequate quality, and at the same time, so the bidder has to provide the state of the art equipment, quality equipment at an affordable or lower prices, or competitive prices. So that is very important. Sneha should not submit herself to this conflict of interest just because her brother in a financial trouble, and she could award the contract to her brother. So that would ultimately lead to tarnishing the image of Sneha, and the trust that the company has been put on Sneha. Now in this context, if you look at the way forward of this question, so what should be Sneha's course of action in this context, right? So you have to write Sneha's course of action, what Sneha should actually do. So I've told you what exactly is conflict of interest. So conflict of interest is a situation where, so when you are delivering your duties, when you're performing your duties, so you favor your relatives, your friends, your family members, right? So instead of others, so you clearly discriminate people. So that is conflict of interest. For example, imagine that there is a contract as a public servant. So there's a contract, and you actually know the information about this contract to be awarded, and you have all the powers to award this contract, but you have preferred your relatives over others, your friends or your family members over others. So conflict of interest needs to be declared to the hospital management and also procurement committee as well. So Sneha should clearly say, or she should clearly declare her conflict of interest, so that will ensure upholding professional ethics on the part of Sneha, right? So Sneha will not tarnish her image. Sneha could further build the trust she has maintained over a period of time, so this will also lead to upholding the professional ethics. And Sneha should also recuse herself from the decision making process. So it is also part of the professional ethics of Sneha. So she has to immediately recuse herself from the decision making process, because her brother is also part of this process, right? So she can delegate the responsibility of vendor selection to an impartial subcommittee, and that demonstrates a commitment to objectivity as well as fairness. And apart from that, there is also a need to establish a transparent procurement criteria. Now, what sort of transparent procurement criteria that she can actually establish? So the criteria should focus on aspects like quality of equipment, pricing, and also the vendor reliability, right? So this is how she can actually establish a transparent procurement criteria. So thereby there will not be any allegations against Sneha that she favored her brother, because the process is transparent and Sneha is accountable, she is answerable. So that further strengthens the decision making process of Sneha. And apart from that, regardless of whether her brother's company is selected or not, Sneha should ensure that she communicates the decision in a professional and transparent manner, especially within her family and among the stakeholders. And lastly, a fair treatment and clear communication about timelines, expectations from the vendor, and also selection criteria should be maintained by Sneha. So this is how Sneha could actually ensure that she is transparent, and she also declared her conflict of interest. She has not favored anyone, right? So in fact, she upheld her professional ethics. So apart from that, the second question is, how would she justify what she chooses to do? So how Sneha can actually justify what she chooses to do? So by ensuring transparency of the process, accountability of the process, so Sneha can actually justify what she chooses to do, right? Because so conflict disclosure demonstrates honesty on the part of Sneha, that when Sneha declares her conflict of interest, so that demonstrates the honesty on the part of Sneha. And in fact, the utilitarian approach emphasizes on maximizing the trust and benefiting the hospitals and all the stakeholders. And secondly, accountability, right? So Sneha could actually document the steps, and that creates ethical decision records. And in fact, consequentialist approach, it would lead to withstanding scrutiny, promotes responsible leadership on the part of Sneha as well, right? And in fact, when we talk about a utilitarian approach, so it was put forward by Bentham, right? So Bentham, it was utilitarianism. So utilitarianism was also a philosophy, right? So maximizing benefits, minimizing risks. So that is closely aligned with the utilitarian principle. And ethical conduct over a short-term gain protects professional standing. So instead of short-term gain by benefiting her brother awarding this tender, so she should look after the ethical conduct, and she should also uphold the ethical professional ethics as well. And in fact, it aligns with the social contract theory, because leaders' implicit agreement to act ethically, to uphold the ethical professional ethics. And in fact, proactive management also demonstrates ethical leadership on the part of Sneha, right? So this is in line with care ethics approach. So it maintains healthy relationship as well as the organizational harmony as well. And so Sneha should recuse herself, so that reflects or that ensures fairness, and that aligns with Immanuel Kant's categorical imperative. So equal treatment for all vendors without any discrimination, without showing any favoritism. So ultimately, so in the third part of the answer, so in this case, how is medical ethics compromised with vested personal interest? Right, so you need to write how medical ethics compromised with vested personal interest. So Sneha's role conflicts with brother's bid, because her brother is in a financially weak position, unstable position. So therefore it is also very important for Sneha's brother to get a good order. And because of this reason, in this backdrop, Sneha's brother could increase pressure on his sister to award this contract to him at any cost. So that would violates the values of impartiality, and it also undermines the prioritizing patient's interests, because so a patient's interests are very important here, right? So what if because just awarding contract to her brother would result in supplying poor medical equipment? So that would ultimately lead to the tarnishing reputation of the entire hospital, not just Sneha. And in fact, it also amounts to compromising transparency, right? So awarding the tender to her brother would lead to compromising the value of transparency. So therefore, failing to disclose a relationship that violates transparency, and it erodes the trust in the procurement system. So there is a potential for favoritism, because temptation to help brother could lead to unjustified preferential treatment, and that would also undermines the merit-based selection. So always needs to favor the merit-based selection, because unfavorably or favorably showing favoritism and awarding this tender to her brother would undermines the merit-based selection that has to be upheld. And prioritizing personal relationships over quality cost could compromise care, and it also violates the beneficence principle as well. And in fact, it also leads to the breach of professional ethics, because favoring family, favoring relatives and friends in the procurement, that violates the value of impartiality. So impartiality is in fact a core principle which is part of Indian Medical Council Regulations 2002. And personal interests influencing decisions, that risks integrity, honesty and trust that Sneha has been enjoying so far. So it is also against maintaining high professional standards and also violating professional ethics by Sneha. So in this context, the conclusion should ultimately be about avoiding conflict of interest and always favoring the merit-based selection in these processes, upholding and also maintaining her integrity and also the trust that the company actually has on Sneha. So that is also very, very important, and that is also ultimately in line with further enhancing the trust of this hospital chain and also adequately ensuring the safety of the patients in the hospitals as well. So that's how you can write a conclusion in an optimistic manner, right? So that's all in this lecture, and thank you so much. And if you like our work, please subscribe our YouTube channel and also hit the like button. Thank you.